Today, we're tackling a fascinating academic paper called An Institutional and Architecture-Based View of Corruption in Nigeria. Now look, when most of us hear the word corruption, we immediately jump to morality, right? We think about bad actors, greed, ethical failings. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if, and this literally blew my mind, we view systemic corruption not as a moral failing, but as a highly logical and honestly ruthlessly efficient reality? Today, we're going to explore how the shadow economy isn't just some glitch in the system. It's actually a fully competing system with its very own architecture.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really break this down, we're going to follow a 5-part roadmap. First, the paradox of plenty. Second, 2 systems of rules. Third, the architecture of corruption. Fourth, why the shadows win. And finally, number 5, the solution matrix.
All right, kicking things off with section 1, the paradox of plenty. We really need to start by highlighting this massive contradiction right at the heart of Nigeria's oil economy. Because you see, you can't truly understand the systemic nature of the shadow economy without grasping this sheer scale of the resources at play here. 2.4 million. That is the staggering number of barrels of crude oil Nigeria produces every single day. To put that in perspective, the country is absolutely flush with natural wealth, boasting 5.29 trillion cubic meters of natural gas reserves, and they're the 5th largest crude oil exporter to the U.S. This sets the stage. We're talking about an incredible resource base that, theoretically at least, should guarantee absolute prosperity.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the stark contrast. On a macro level, you've got these vast resources and projected real GDP growth hitting as high as 8.1%. But on the ground, the everyday reality, we see periods where consumer price inflation has hit a staggering 17.8%. Just imagine your paycheck losing almost a fifth of its value, while the broader country supposedly gets richer. It completely destroys the purchasing power of the average citizen's income. And this immense economic pressure, it's a crucial driver. It's literally the engine that forces everyday citizens into the informal, alternative economy just to survive and make up for their dwindling fortunes.
Moving on to section 2, 2 systems of rules. This brings us to the core theoretical framework of today's explainer. It's the idea that there are actually 2 competing systems governing society. To wrap our heads around this, we need to look at a nation as if it were, well, just a giant organization. Think of it like a massive Fortune 500 company or a huge university. Every organization has an organizational architecture. These are the formal structures, the control systems, the incentives, and the culture that are specifically designed to ensure its survival. A nation uses these exact same tools to organize its people and manage its resources. But here is where the split happens, and it's fascinating. We essentially have 2 separate corporations fighting for the exact same market. On one side, you have the formal institutions. These are your official laws, the courts, the standard government structures. On the other side, you have informal institutions. Think unwritten cultural rules, norms, and really strong ethnic or regional loyalties. The source material argues something profound here. Corruption isn't just random chaos. It's actually an equilibrium. It's a balance established between a weakened formal system and a highly strengthened informal one.
Which leads us perfectly into section 3, the architecture of corruption.
Let's look at exactly how this informal system successfully builds its own competing organizational architecture to rival the state. Just like a legitimate corporation, and honestly, sometimes run way better than legal startups, the shadow economy relies on 4 pillars: structure, controls and incentives, processes, and culture. The absolutely crucial point here is how the incentives compare. See, formal institutions often incentivize their agents really poorly because of budget constraints or bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the shadow economy, it offers highly lucrative, super fast rewards. When the opportunity cost of following the official rules just becomes too expensive, people rationally migrate over to the informal processes. And those informal processes are literally designed with built-in inefficiencies on the formal side to attract those private gains. But we can't forget the true cost here. The paper highlights this incredibly powerful quote from Zajali and Wright. Corruption is a furtive act that thrives on darkness, deception, denial, and treachery. So while these informal systems might be highly lucrative for a select few, they basically act as domestic sabotage. And this is a huge takeaway for any broken system you might look at globally. Shadow economies crank up transaction costs for everyone else. They victimize the broader public by actively sabotaging the collective national interest.
So this naturally leads to a really fascinating question. If the formal system is being sabotaged from within and the shadows pay so much better, why doesn't the official government just collapse entirely? Let's unpack the psychological grip of the shadow economy.
That brings us to section 4, why the shadows win.
We're now going to look at the systemic and psychological reasons why individuals rationally choose to maintain and protect this informal shadow system instead of the formal one. Academics call this value congruence. But really, in plain English, it's extreme peer pressure. It means fitting in with the crowd. In a system where informal rules completely dominate, the organizational culture normalizes the corruption. If your personal values don't align with the corrupt incentives of the group, you become an outcast. You're slapped with the label of an outgroup member. This incredibly powerful collective culture forces conformity, which makes informal rules highly resistant to reform. Because, let's face it, going against the grain means risking your livelihood and your entire social standing.
And this brilliantly illustrates where traditional academic models kind of get it wrong. Take a look at this model by researcher C.R. Williamson, which evaluates institutional strength. Traditional academia usually places Nigeria down in quadrant 4, weak formal and weak informal institutions. But the researchers point out a wild paradox here. The reality on the ground is actually quadrant 2. It's a struggling, weak formal system locked in battle with an incredibly strong informal system that's deeply rooted in ethnic, religious, and regional loyalties.
To break this down further, a researcher named Buse identified 4 distinct mechanisms showing exactly how these strong informal institutions outcompete the official government. First up is replacement. Informal services are just plain faster. In Nigerian colloquialism, these speedy alternative routes are often recognized as oluwole. Second, we have undermining. This is where informal actors actively sabotage official channels because they genuinely feel their informal way of distributing resources is more just or fair. Third is support. This is wild. This is where informal gossip networks actually enforce rules better than the actual police and force competition. The sheer lucrative nature of the shadow economy forces the formal government to scramble just to compete for the attention of its own citizens.
All right, final section. Section 5, the solution matrix. So, the big question. How do we actually fix this? Well, the paper argues that merely indicting individuals or relying on futile arrests just doesn't work. I mean, the source notes that the former EFCC anti-corruption chairman, Nuhu Ribadu, even had to relocate to the UK because of constant death threats. Arrests alone do not change the architecture. Instead, the authors propose an architectural solution matrix, and honestly, it's brilliant. It says you have to audit the institutions. If an informal system is successfully replacing a formal one because it's faster, well, the most logical step is to just privatize the formal institution. If the informal system is undermining the formal one to provide services, bring those shadow actors into the light, make them officially bonded agents, and if they're supporting the system, officially hire them as contractors.
It really comes down to 4 clear, actionable steps for the government to successfully merge these 2 competing systems. Step 1, accept that this equilibrium exists. You can't just wave a magic wand and decree it away. Step 2, implement modern IT systems to massively increase transparency and control. Step 3, reform the formal architecture so it's as flexible and fast as the informal one. And step 4, formally validate these informal systems through strict, third-party annual audits. These 4 steps effectively bring the shadow economy right onto the official ledger. It's a hugely pragmatic takeaway for any deeply entrenched system anywhere in the world. You can't always arrest your way out of a problem. Sometimes, actually, you have to integrate it. We're going to leave you with this final thought. If systemic corruption is, at its core, just a highly efficient, strongly incentivized informal system outcompeting a weak formal one, is the ultimate cure simply to make the shadow rules official?